Hello, everybody. By way of introduction, I will read a poem by Emily Dickinson. Allow me to begin. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell your name the livelong day to an admiring bog. Like it? How about this short story by my niece, Madeline Whitten?
There once was a young puppy who lived in the shoe. A shoe. She didn't know what to do. It was so stinky in the shoe. She got some flowers and put it in a pot, then added some snot, mixed it up and put it all over the shoe. It was clean and shiny, but still stinky too.
Can we say that one of the pieces presented here is more creative than the other? Of course, Dickinson is widely acknowledged as an eminent poet who pushed the art of poetry well beyond the boundaries of the day. However, my niece broke her own boundaries when she created her own masterpiece. Dickinson was chosen also because most of her work was never to be seen. It was published posthumously by her sister Lavinia. So if Lavinia hadn't released Emily's poems to the public, would they still be creative? I'm Shannon Whitten, senior lecturer at the University of Central Florida, a Dickinsonian nobody perhaps, but one with a passion for understanding creativity. In this lecture, I hope to help you understand a little bit more about creativity from a psychological perspective. We start with this deceptively simple question. What is creativity? This is a question that keeps a lot of academics up at night. Not surprisingly, just agreeing on a conceptual definition can be contentious. However, a generally accepted definition, called the standard definition of creativity, has emerged over the past few decades. And here it is. Creativity is the ability to produce work that is both original and valuable. Originality entails something unexpected and new, whereas valuable often denotes something high in quality that perhaps accomplishes a goal or is useful or functional. It is noteworthy that this definition includes two equally important parts. First, a creative response is clearly an original one. Something must be unique in order for it to be deemed creative. This seems rather uncontroversial in most discussions about creativity. A creative entity must possess an aspect of newness. Secondly, a creative response is also a valuable one, though what is valuable must be defined within a particular context. The value may be to a culture or group, like the discovery of DNA or Emily Dickinson's Hope is the Thing with Feathers, or this value could be in relation to an individual, such as a child writing a story for the first time and finding value in rhyme and rhythm and meter. Throughout the history of creativity research, many synonyms for value have been offered, such as relevance, usefulness, significance, and appropriateness. Importantly, though specific ideas about value may change across time, people, and situations, the concept of value itself remains important to the definition of creativity. This definition is intuitive to many. Originality without value may be inconsequential. See this clip of the movie Garden State with Natalie Portman portraying somebody as inconsequentially creative.
You know what I do when I feel completely unoriginal?
Blah, 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 blah.
I make a noise or I do something that no one has ever done before, and then I can feel unique again, even if it's only for like a second.
So no one's ever done that?
No, not in this spot, no. You just witnessed a completely original moment in human history. It's refreshing, you should try it.
Oh, no, thanks.
No, come on.
No, you know what? I think that was good enough for the both of us.
Come on. What are you, shy? This is your one opportunity to do something that no one has ever done before and that no one will copy again throughout human existence. And if nothing else, you'll be remembered as the one guy who ever did this. This one thing.
How's that?
Oh, I've done that one before.
Conversely, there are several valuable creations that are not original, such as following a formula to generate the right answer to a problem. According to most of the scientific literature on creativity, regardless of whether we are talking about fine art or design, complex aeronautical engineering, or just deciding what to wear for the next work event, a creative expression or solution includes both originality and value. Though the standard definition is widely accepted, many issues remain. Original to who? Value in accordance with which standard? The standard definition is broad enough to encompass creativity from many perspectives, but this openness leads to questions about how to apply the definition of creativity across these varying perspectives. For instance, how do the definitional features of creativity apply when we are talking about a creative person versus a creative object? Also, does our definition retain the same sense when we apply it to the initial attempts of a child composing her first story versus the professional attempts of a seasoned poet? First, we'll talk about perspective, or what is being evaluated as potentially creative. One useful delineation was offered by Scott Barry Kaufman and his colleagues, called the 4 Ps of creativity. These are person, product, process, and press. Let's discuss these perspectives now. Let's start with the person perspective. From this perspective, creativity refers to a certain type of person. For example, one may ask if a certain person, like Emily Dickinson or my niece, is a creative individual and what makes them creative. Next, we come to the product perspective. From this perspective, creativity refers to a tangible item. For example, a painting, joke, film, or idea. As a case in point, a researcher may evaluate Dickinson's poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers, as a creative product, asking whether or not the poem is creative in itself. Then there's the process perspective. From this perspective, creativity refers to engaging in the task of bringing something new into the world. A researcher might ask what cognitive steps are involved in generating a creative product. Finally, we have the press perspective. This perspective focuses on the environment in which creativity emerges and flourishes. Are certain environments more conducive to creativity? For example, researchers may look at school or work environments to determine the factors that enable creative problem solving. In short, when we apply the standard definition of creativity and think about what it is to be creative, it is useful to think about the perspective we are taking and ask what it is we are evaluating as original and valuable. We may need to distinguish the poet herself from a particular poem. Or maybe we want to evaluate the different processes among various writers. Or maybe we need to think about how culture and environment were different for 2 different artists and how that contributed to their creativity. In addition to perspective, another useful distinction found in the creativity literature concerns the scope of creativity. This distinction, originating from Dr. Kaufman's work with Dr. Bagetto, is called the 4C approach. First, we had 4 Ps, and now we have 4 Cs. For this approach, you could say we are looking at the impact of the creative response. Let's start with big C level creativity. When we're talking about imminent creativity, I'm talking the kind of creativity that significantly alters the culture or an academic discipline or the future of all humanity. This is big C creativity. Big C creativity includes Nobel Prize winning authors, Frida Kahlo level artists, as well as Darwin category scientists. Big C may describe people like Frida Kahlo or Emily Dickinson, ideas like the theory of relativity, or products like the poem Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Generally, if there isn't an encyclopedia entry with at least 100 words on the person or work, it probably doesn't fall into this category. Big C creativity has a massive impact on many people over a significant amount of time. Therefore, it is hard to distinguish a person, idea, or object as qualifying for Big C creativity until many years have passed. Next, the category of Pro C is defined as expert level creativity that has not yet attained legendary status. This includes people who are creative in their professional lives, but haven't quite made it to that imminent Big C level of status. For example, there are 30 animators listed on the credits for most animated films. It's likely that most of them would be creative, regularly generating ideas that are original and valuable to the movie. This is beyond the level of creativity required to qualify for the everyday creativity that we engage in, like spicing up a classic recipe or writing something clever in a coworker's birthday card. But these animators are unlikely to be acknowledged as legendary. In contrast, little c creativity does represent this everyday kind of creativity. As I've said, like spicing up the classic recipe or writing something clever in a birthday card or adding entertaining graphics to a lecture. We may not be Frida Kahlo, and we may not get paid to routinely add our original and valuable ideas, but we all, as human beings, are creative every single day. In other words, little c creativity includes generating original and valuable ideas to meet everyday challenges. Finally, the fourth and final C is mini c. Mini c creativity is defined as the creative insights involved in learning. More specifically, the novel and personally meaningful interpretation of actions and events. A poignant example used by Kaufman is that of Helen Keller, a girl who lost her sight and hearing as an infant, and who famously discovered that objects can be represented by symbols or words. Her discovery that symbols in the form of words can be used to represent objects is not at all new, but it was new and valuable for her. In fact, her discovery of that was a personal revolution. Here's a video clip of a movie about Helen Keller and the first time she discovered words with her teacher, Annie Sullivan.
W-A-T-E-R, water. It has a name. W-A-T. Yes. Oh, my dear. Round. Yes. Pump.
Kaufman writes, in many C, the initial spark of creativity doesn't have to be held up to the same standards that we use for typical everyday creativity. To qualify as mini C level creativity, an idea or product doesn't need to be new and original necessarily, just new and original to the creator at the time. So while we may agree that creativity involves both originality and value, we must ask, original and valuable from what perspective and on what scale? I just want to talk a little bit about the process of creativity in the brain. Of course, this is a complex subject, but I want to draw your attention to some recent research. Recently, attention has been directed to the frontal lobe of the brain and the division between the middle or medial structures and the side or lateral structures. The medial parts form the default mode network, DMN, also called the imagination network. The DMN is especially active when we are daydreaming. In other words, when our thoughts are not focused on achieving a goal. This network is generally thought to work in opposition to the lateral parts, known as the executive attention network, the network that does direct attention towards the attainment of external goals. Though the executive attention network has traditionally been emphasized in the educational process, a key finding in modern cognitive neuroscience is that we spend about half our life in a mind-wandering or daydreaming state, where the imagination network is active. That may seem like a lot of time to power down, except that when we are daydreaming, we are in no way powered down. Our brains are incredibly active. The imagination network is involved in self-generated cognition, which comprises planning, self-referential thinking, wishing, and so on. The DMN is important to creativity because of three salient components: personal meaning-making, mental simulation, and perspective taking. Let's turn our attention to some measures of creativity. First of all, why measure creativity? Though our understanding of creativity may be limited, it's important to try. Personally, I believe in trying to measure creativity to build on scientific knowledge, but I'm cautious when applying these tests to evaluate personal potential. These measures of creativity have allowed us to find neurological structures related to creativity and to study the impact of a creative life on health and well-being. One common measure of creativity is the Remote Associates Test, also known as the RAT. The theory behind the RAT is that chains of semantic associations are the basis of all thinking. As I sit here, I see my water bottle and I connect that water bottle with water from a lake. But someone more creative than me might see the water bottle and effortlessly connect it to something much more remote, like the Roman Colosseum. Might go something like this: water bottle, lakes, Venice, Rome, Colosseum. I don't know. Put simply, anyone with a brain could associate water bottle with lake. Water and lakes are concepts closely associated because they frequently co-occur in life. But according to this theory, only a really creative person can connect the water bottle with the Colosseum. The RAT was designed to test this specific ability to make very distant conceptual associations. All right, enough of the theory, let's try it. Read the following word triads and come up with one word that fits into all three. Obviously, if you're not a native speaker of English, this won't be a very fair test, but I hope it still illustrates the point of the test for you. So first we have out, dog, and cat. Here, the word house unites all three in English because some relatively common English pairs are outhouse, doghouse, and house cat. Let's try some more. Surprise, line, and birthday. The word party unites all three here. Surprise party, party line, birthday party. Next, cottage, Swiss, and cake. standard answers to the above items are cottage cheese, Swiss cheese, and cheesecake. Finally, let's try one more. Loser, throat, and spot. The answer is sore loser, sore throat, and sore spot. Expectedly, there are pros and cons to using the RAT as a test of creativity. On the plus side, the RAT is a very easy test to administer and score. It is quantitative, yielding a non-subjective numeric result, which psychologists love. We love it, love it. However, this test probably reveals more of a propensity for verbal fluency than creativity, as you creative folks who don't frequently speak English probably know about right now. For example, how would this translate to the visuospatial ability of an artist or choreographer? This test may completely miscategorize very creative people in visual fields. However, it is frequently used as a measure of creative insight in research contexts. You can find an English version by following this link, or you can use this reference to find a Dutch version if you're interested in more. Another type of creativity test is the Torrance test. Torrance tests rely on divergent thinking, a type of thinking that involves generating multiple solutions to a problem. In a Torrance test, you are typically asked to generate many responses to a situation within a fixed period of time. Let's do one now. This task is called the unusual uses test. You have 1 minute to write down all the uses you can think of for a brick. Feel free, of course, to write in your native language. Ready, go. Okay, stop. Let's see how you did. You may wonder how the scoring of such tests may be done. Let's say this person came up with the following 5 responses in the allotted time. Uses a paperweight, uses a weapon against possible intruders, use it to threaten your big brother when he's being a jerk, paint a face on it, and it can be your buddy if you ever get stuck on a desert island, and to name it, rock the brick. Or use it to improve your cooking. There are 2 main components to scoring. Actually, there's more ways to score it, but these are the main ones. So these are first, fluency, the ability to generate multiple different responses. This is scored by simply counting the number of relevant responses. I would give this person a 4 since the last response doesn't seem particularly relevant. Next, originality is the ability to generate unusual or uncommon responses. This is scored by giving the prompt to a large group of people and establishing a list of the most common responses. Responses not on that list are counted as original. I believe that only the 4th response would possibly be counted as original, so this person would receive a score of 1. Torrance tests continue to be frequently used across educational settings to screen for giftedness. Torrance tests are also widely used because they provide a quantification of creativity that has a strong basis in theory. However, they are not devoid of limitations. Firstly, again, results may be predicated on an individual's verbal ability. Also, these tests may emphasize the idea generation stages of creativity over the execution stages, which many argue are equally important. Let's move on to the Inventory of Creative Activities and Achievements, or ICAA. This is an example of a self-report assessment, an assessment that asks people to report on their own attitudes and behaviors rather than testing performance like the ones we just talked about. This inventory asks about specific behaviors and achievements. The ICAA asks participants to report on creative activities and achievements across 8 different domains: literature, music, arts and crafts, cooking, sports, visual arts, performing arts, and science and engineering. For each domain, participants are asked about 6 specific behaviors through 3 levels of questions. 1, frequency of engagement within the domain. How often do you participate in these activities? Second, achievements within the domain. What have you achieved? What kinds of awards have you won? What have you published? Those kinds of things. And third, the amount of time participants have been engaged with that activity. You can access the ICAA here. Versions are available in English, French, and German. By asking about both frequency of engagement in activities and about specific achievements, the ICAA captures the scope of creative activity because little c is best captured by the frequency of engagement, whereas big and pro C are best encapsulated by achievements. One drawback may be the limited number of domains. For example, what about fashion design or gardening or comedy? Nevertheless, the ICAA has been shown to have good reliability and validity, and it's flexible enough to be administered in a variety of settings. Finally, we come to whether or not we can improve creativity. And the simple answer is yes, there are many ways that have been scientifically validated. I'm going to just tell you about 5, distilling some wisdom from 3 books that I will include in a reference summary. Here are some of the highlights from those books. First of all, daydreaming, in other words, mind wandering. Daydreaming basically activates the default mode network and serves a similar function to the dreams we have at night, in that our executive attention network shuts off, but we can still access inner thoughts and memories. Many studies have shown the connection between daydreaming and creativity. Next, practice some kinds of meditation. It has also been found that mindfulness is important to creative productivity. This is not contrary to daydreaming. A creative life hinges on balance between mindfulness and mind wandering. Not all forms of meditation equally improve creativity, though. The important thing to consider is how the meditation deals with the thoughts that will inevitably arise during meditation. The issue is whether they seek to eliminate such thoughts or just allow whatever thoughts to occur and notice them. To enhance creativity, you would want to choose a mindfulness technique that allows you to notice and become aware of inner thoughts rather than trying to eliminate them. This kind of meditation is often referred to as open monitoring meditation, or non-reactively monitoring the content of experience from moment to moment, primarily as a means to recognize the nature of emotional and cognitive patterns. This type of meditation is thought to boost the activation of the imagination network. Also, accept where you are in the creative process. Recognize that you aren't Emily Dickinson. Manage your expectations. If you find yourself saying something like, this will never be as revolutionary as Frida Kahlo's work, or when my hero was my age, he revolutionized technology. You need to recognize that you aren't Frida Kahlo. You do you. No one jumped immediately into imminent creativity, so challenge yourself where you are. Just try to learn a little bit more or be a little bit better than you were yesterday. Next, have a flow experience. In other words, get into the zone. Flow is a state in which you are performing an activity while being fully immersed in it, a feeling of energized focus, complete absorption, and loss of a sense of time. But modern research reveals that the most important aspect of increasing creativity is to train your ability to shift focus to and from generating ideas and executing them. So to generate ideas, execute them. Back to generating ideas, back to executing them. There are many methods of doing this. One important one is the CREATES program by Shelley Carson. So now let's summarize what we've talked about. Creativity is commonly defined as something original and valuable, but how we define these terms depends, among other things, on the perspective we're taking, what we are evaluating as creative, and the scope. What is the impact of this creative source? For example, Dickinson's person and many of her poems are likely evaluated as highly creative, and she has attained big C creativity. My niece, Maddie's story, however, is a perfect example of mini C creativity, but just wait until 2052. So hopefully by then, Madeline will have achieved imminent creativity or not, we'll see. There are many networks in the brain responsible for elevating creativity, but the ability to switch easily between the default mode network and executive areas has been identified as significantly important. Also, though being far from perfect, tests of creativity have helped us understand aspects of creativity, including the neurology, educational, cultural, and significant importance of creativity. And finally, there are scientifically validated ways of enhancing creativity. Finally, I want to end by saying that creativity is important. The study of creativity is still in its nascent stages. As such, we have more questions than answers, but I believe one thing is indisputable. Creativity adds meaning to life at both individual and collective levels. This implies it is definitely worth pursuing in both terms of research and personal exploration. So again, I am Shannon Witten from the University of Central Florida. Here's my email. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at this address and I will get back with you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time and inviting me into your class. I look forward to your questions.